year, and we're supposed to be happy, excited, and in a good mood, but sometimes our circumstances don't give themselves to that. Sometimes we kind of find out that we have lost someone during the year. We have an empty place at the table. We may have had a hard economic year because of circumstances outside of ourselves. We may have had broken relationships. We may have had difficulties of all sorts of this coming up into this year. And so what do you do when you don't feel jolly? I think there's an important lesson that we can learn from the Christmas story, more than we can learn from culture. You see, in culture, the picture is always of happy children and happy parents gladly spending their money to make the Christmas ideal. Even the Christmas movies, have you noticed that they all start with something wrong? Of course, if you didn't have something wrong, there wouldn't be much of a movie. Can you imagine a movie, just take pictures of a family as they go through their ordinary life with no problems? Nobody would go see it. You got to have a problem. But you also have to solve it by New Year's. And so they go through all sorts of rigmarole to try to figure out how to fix a broken relationship, how to be with somebody, how to have fit in family. And so they always end with a kiss, and it always starts snowing. You know, I've noticed that life is not like that. Life is not always easy. Life is not always a picture or postcard. What happens when you come up against a Christmas and you're not ready to feel jolly? Well, if we could just have a reason for the suffering, if we could just figure out something that says this is why it happened, even if it's not a very good reason. 23 years ago, my father died. He was 62 years old. Those numbers bother me. For one thing, I'm 62 now. But even more, there were 23 years that I didn't have that I could have had with my father. And when people say, what happened? Why did he die so young? And I tell them he was a smoker and he died of lung cancer. Many people almost have a sense of relief. Well, at least there was a reason. And the subtext to that is, I don't smoke, so that won't happen to me. If there's a reason. But there's not always a reason. Sometimes we do everything right. We study hard for school, and somehow things go amiss. We work hard in our jobs, and somehow we don't get that promotion or don't get that profit. Sometimes the economy, the larger forces in the world have caused us to have a difficult Christmas. We think there ought to be a reason that everything ought to be fair. And it just happens so often, just often enough, that we think that that is indeed the case, and then something that is totally unfair happens. How do we deal with that? A couple of thoughts come to me. One of them is that God does not run the universe to make me happy. There are larger forces at work. There's larger plans in the mill. There's larger fish to fry than just me. And sometimes we get caught up in the circumstances. makes it even more important. That God allows those things to happen to me for my sake. I've had things that I deserved, that I've gotten the short end of the stick on. I've got things that I didn't deserve, and I've grown from all of them. In fact, I've grown more when it was unfair, when it was too hard. Our usual attempt to try to understand this, we want to blame somebody, we want to blame the circumstances, or we want to blame God. But we can't, those are legitimate responses, but we can't stay there. We can't live there. We have to move on. And we can discover that God can work great things in our lives if we're listening and paying attention. We can't control everything that happens to us, but we can control our response. One of the great things about being a pastor is that you meet a lot of people of great faith. I remember a lady, I may have told you about her before, but she's such a beacon in my life. She was a member of the church, and she had heart disease, and she knew that she was eventually going to die from this, and it was just going to get worse and worse and worse until she died. And she would be in one of her regular trips into the hospital, and I would go see her, and I said, well, how are you doing? How did you stay in the hospital bed? She said, it's been great. I got to witness to 2 doctors and 4 nurses. Everything was an opportunity to do something for God. That was a strong faith. And it seems to me the people of great faith have also been people of big adversities. They've been tested. They've been put through the fire. They've come out pure. Abraham and Sarah were childless. They had been struggled with infertility for their whole lives, and then God shows up. Now I wonder if Sarah didn't let a thought come to her every so often. Why did God have to show up when I was 90? Why did he show up when I was 20? I think 2 things. One is you wouldn't have known that God did it. A 20-year-old has a baby, that's natural. A 90-year-old, God did it. And you wouldn't have known about a great faith that they had to receive that promise and to go off in not knowing where they were going, but led by God. They had to have a mature faith. They had to have a faith that was tested and tried. They had to have tried God over and over again to trust God to say, go and I'll tell you when you get there. And they said, well, go. Great faith. The Hebrew people were in slavery for several generations until God sent Moses. You know, God, you could have done it a couple of generations sooner. Wasn't there somebody around that could have done it 100 years before? Saved a lot of pain and agony. You know, God, maybe you could have cut the 40 years in the wilderness down to 2 or 3. But then we wouldn't have seen a people of faith. Because they would have been formed into the people they became through the hardships of Egypt, through the hardships of the desert. They melded and became a community. They became a great people. They became God's people. Tested and tried. Failed. Picked up. Start again. Great faith because of hardship. Mary, a young girl, the angel says you're
We just have a snapshot of the Bible, but I can imagine what it was like. How am I going to tell my parents? How am I going to tell Joseph? What are the people of the village going to do? Now, I've never been pregnant, but I imagine it's not easy to ride a donkey across the desert when you're pregnant. It's not easy to give birth without any assistance except for your husband in a barn with animals, all kinds of animals, wanted and unwanted. And yet Mary had a great faith. She trusted God in all of this. She gave birth to a messy situation in a messy world. And yet Jesus came. You know, God could have gone and made a Messiah several generations earlier, several centuries earlier. There's had lots of trouble in the history of Israel. He could have done it much earlier with the conquering hero, but instead he came as a baby. The vulnerability of all the things that a human being would have with disease, with violence, with all the things that come with being a child born in first century Jerusalem, in Judea, in Israel. But God chose that. In fact, Jesus said, I didn't come for those who are well. I came for those who are sick. Jesus didn't come to the influential. He didn't come to the powerful. He didn't come to the religious leaders. He came to the fishermen and others who were scraping a living out of the land. He came to people who were lepers, who were demon-possessed. And he showed them a sign of the kingdom of God when he healed them. One of the sayings I love about Rick Warren is that God never wastes a hurt. Those fishermen, those lepers, those demon-possessed people, what a witness to faith they were. No wonder the Christian faith grew. When people testified to what God had done for them and how they ended up with great faith. Jesus came into the world for people with messy lives. So if you're